Hi guys, Jimmy Fluke here from Apex Racing Team, and today we're going to take a look at the VRS DirectForce Pro Pedals. We're going to sort of focus on how I, as a professional sim racer, use the pedals, what adjustments that I do or do not make with them, how I would set them up with the software, for example, as well, and finally the big adjustment with the brake pedal, switching from the blue to the red spring, which we'll get onto in a little bit. But without further ado, let's get stuck in. So we'll jump right in and discuss the throttle pedal first. That's the one that will make you go quickest in a straight line, at least. The throw and the travel on the pedal is quite long. For me personally, I like to have it just that little bit shorter. The adjustment with that is with this little bar here, unscrew, move it slightly further up just so that the pedal can't travel quite as far, and you're sort of limited a little bit that way. The reason for me personally doing that was just a physical preference. I just didn't like it traveling quite as far, and I found that my foot would sort of be like stretched out just that little bit too far for my liking, so I wanted just a little bit shorter and punchier. You can also adjust the sort of angle of the face of the pedal as well, so it can be more that way, a little bit higher and a little bit lower. It's not like if you set it up exactly in a certain way, it's going to be better or worse. But the adjustability is quite nice, and having the ability to set it how you like and what feels comfortable for you is a very nice touch. So the second pedal that I want to move on to is the clutch pedal. I'll save the brake for last. It feels really nice. It has a non-linear sort of throw, and there's nice resistance sort of in the middle. It's more useful for someone who, again, wouldn't have the dual clutch capability with their rim. It could also be useful for those who utilize a sim for drifting purposes, where you want to, quickly but in a sort of more progressive way, press the clutch whilst your arms are sort of all over the place. Okay, so finally, we'll move on to the brake pedal here. By default, it has this blue spring, which I believe the max force of this blue spring allows for 65 kilograms of force. It also comes with a red spring, which is double that approximately. I think it's in and around the 130 kilo mark. Typically, for almost all use cases, not absolutely every use case, but all or almost all of them will use the red spring. The greater strength and therefore control that we have over the brake pedal is a really nice addition. I'll mention another couple of adjustments, or the one that I personally have versus maybe the rest of my teammates is that I run a little bit less preload and have the pedal run that actual little bit longer with the red spring. I like a little bit of movement from the brake pedal. I don't want it to be completely stiff where I can't feel it with my foot. Okay, so we're going to take a quick look just at changing the blue spring out for the red spring here. So we'll just undo this little clip, and we need something pointed just to completely prise this out of position. So if I could, thank you. Just prise that out of place, and then we can pop this up. We'll collapse a little bit. Feed it down through, leave it like that. So we'll just swap the blue spring for the red spring. Just make sure that it goes back in the way that it came out. It can be a little bit fiddly, but that is the red spring now put in place, and see that there's very little movement with that, even with the sort of quite long tie rod here. So we're in the rig now, and hopefully you guys have physically then mounted the pedals onto the base plate that you have. Make sure that it's comfortable for you. There's no absolute requirement to actually mount the clutch itself, so if you want to position it in a little bit more of a karting position where you can bring the pedals much further across, then feel free to do so. So from within the config tool here and within the pedal section, we've got clutch, brake, throttle. The main thing that I adjust and touch here is the force adjustment. This is basically your dead zones. Reason why you would knock a little bit off at the top is so that if your foot comes ever so slightly off the end stop here, you're not going to immediately start losing throttle percentage. So my foot at this point is just coming off, and yeah, it's not an immediate drop. From the bottom of the throttle, or at least in terms of the min force, if you're gently resting your foot on the throttle pedal, it's not going to then register throttle input until you've actually put a little bit of weight into it. That goes across all three pedals. Where you want the dead zones will, be determined by how much you want to rest your foot on the pedal before you actually have any movements. I would typically set this at like 5% on the minimum across actually throttle and brake, and therefore clutch then as well. And then at the top, I typically give myself 3 to 5% from the top as well across all of the pedals. You can then make further adjustments to the sort of shaping of the force of the pedal. An adjustment that I did make personally is with the throttle. So whenever I first moved to the VRS pedals and started wearing boots for the first time instead of socks, I found myself sort of carrying more throttle or not able to jump off the throttle quite as quickly as I'd done before. So I would actually drop the sort of the 20% slider here down a bit, so that as I was coming off the throttle, it wasn't hanging quite as long. Again, it's a small adjustment, but it's what I found worked a little bit better for me, just to minimize excessive overlap between the throttle and brake. So if you want more of a like S curve, you can start it out quite restrictive here, and then it ramps up a lot later, so that you've got maybe a little bit more control through the middle of the throttle range. And you can do this the same with the brake and clutch as well, although I would generally recommend a linear brake pedal where possible. And with the clutch, you can actually adjust this in such a way where you can make a much larger range for your like bite point. So if you know that your clutch bite point is in the like 50% range, you could do something like this, where a little bit of clutch input puts you in that range, and then I'm pushing the throttle or pushing the clutch pedal a lot, and then maxed out there it's only at 62%. So that's an option for you if you want to like have really good fidelity in a certain range for your clutch pedal. So that's the options that you have there in terms of setting it up, and then you would save the profile that you've created there to a file and then to the device, and then from there that's then saved, and you can use it within the sim. So there we have it. That is our little summary from a pro driver's perspective of the VRS DirectForce Pro pedals. Hope you guys enjoyed it. We have some good news. The pedals, as well as the wheelbase and the wheel rim, are back in stock at apexracingsim.com, so feel free to check that out and get your order in ASAP. In terms of the adjustability of the pedals, which I did sort of mention before, there's a wonderful video by David Williams over at VRS covering every single adjustment that you can make in these pedals, and a very well put together guide on the pedals as a whole. So feel free to check that out as well. But that's all from us for now. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Oh no!
Great outtake.